What's up, everybody? Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. Right now, I am in our hotel, motel, Holiday Inn room with fellow comedian J.R. Williams. Not to be confused with Junior Williams, not to be confused with Junior Williams. It is J.R. Williams. That is his name, and he is a comedian that is actually from Gaylord, Michigan. Not to be confused with Gaylord, Michigan. He's from Gaylord, Michigan. So, we have been on the road for the last, I believe it's 6 days now, or today's maybe day 6, and it has been fun, but it has been quite an adventure and a lot of driving, most of which JR has done. I think I've done maybe 2 hours of driving, and that even seems like it's a lot for what I did. I think I maybe did an hour and a half driving. But it's not that I'm a bad driver, it's just that JR is used to driving. So that's what we've been doing. There's been a lot of controversy, and I've been dealing with a lot of it on Facebook as far as, not me personally, but just current events. And because I'm the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world, people expect me to have opinions on certain things like this hair and the way that it's poofing up right there. And also the Kevin Hart situation, which I did a whole video on the Kevin Hart situation. I was ready to edit it and I was ready to upload it. And then he went in and apologized. And at first I was like, yeah, he shouldn't apologize. And then it hit me. Kevin Hart is an actual industry comedian. And when I say that, it's not a dig, it's not a put down, it's just what it is. And Kevin Hart was going to be hosting the Oscars, which of course, is watched mostly by gay men. So if you piss off gay men and you want to be on the network, then you got to apologize. And a lot of people were under the impression that he had already apologized, and they said that he had apologized in an interview in Rolling Stone magazine that he had done in 2015. So I went ahead and researched that article, and I went ahead and read the entire interview. And at no point does he apologize. What he says is that nowadays people make a big deal about things, so he'd just rather not deal with it, which is not apologizing. And I get when people say that he shouldn't apologize, but at the same time, if you're Kevin Hart and you're making that kind of money and you're building that kind of brand, or you've built that kind of brand, maybe you don't want to mess with it and you just feel like, you know what, I'm just going to apologize and call it a day. Like, I don't really care about this that much anyway. I mean, like, I personally know that I've said certain things that I would be willing to apologize for, but not because anybody was making me, but just because my thinking has grown and I've evolved, and I feel like I don't necessarily stand behind those statements anymore. I mean, there's times when I've said, fuck X group of people, or fuck X organization, and now it's like, yeah, I still sometimes feel like where that came from. I know where that came from because obviously it was my thinking. I know where I was at the time. So I don't completely disavow that thinking because I like that it got me to where I am now in the way that I think now. But at the same time, I would definitely apologize for it because I don't stand behind that particular statement anymore. And my thinking, like I said, has changed. So when it came to Kevin Hart, I think it was important for him to do what he felt was right for him, which was to apologize and then to just go ahead and say that he didn't want to do it after all, which I don't really know that he had the choice, because after the controversy that happened, I don't know that the Oscars could have necessarily had him host at that point anyway. And a lot of people were talking about the gay community, which that did bother me. Not that I'm always blindly following the gay community, but when people were trying to make it seem like the gay community is just trying to make black men bow down, that's not. And nobody that I know is looking for that as far as in the community or from the community. And I'm around a fair amount, but people have acknowledged that within different ethnic communities, me being Mexican, me being Latino, I know that we have a lot of homophobia in the Latino community, and it's no secret that the black community has had a lot of homophobia historically. That's why there's the whole down low movement, or it's not necessarily a movement, but the down low phenomenon. That comes from homophobia and the black community not necessarily being the most open to gay. But I saw some people online acting like one person that I really do like And this isn't to throw him under the bus in any way. It was just like part of the conversation. And I usually on my channel, if you haven't noticed, will cite people. And this is in no way to throw him under the bus. And I might go ahead and edit that name out just so that he doesn't have to live with the consequences of this forever. But yeah, I had a particular friend that was saying that at this point, as far as black people and homophobia goes, it's just in their DNA. And I was like, no, that's not the way DNA works, one. And number two, it's not just in your DNA, because I personally have a lot of friends that are black that aren't at all homophobic, that actually are very accepting of their friends and family members, and even myself when it comes to homosexuality. And it's not that they're forgiving me, which is where some people kind of hang out with homosexuality. In a lot of cases, when you're gay, you'll notice that there are certain people that truly do accept you. There's certain people that truly do love you. And then there's some people that kind of pity you and feel like you need their approval and for them to pray for you and hope that one day you get better or God heals you of this affliction that you have called homosexuality. And those people I usually am very patient with, because I know that they don't necessarily get it, but I feel like the fact that they're even willing to hang out with a person like me, not that they should be forgiving me, but at the same time is a step in the right direction and a step to them actually getting it. And I've had friends that have gone all the way from completely homophobic to that stage where they're kind of forgiving me for being me, to one day just being like, yeah, I really do get it. And I think that even when it comes to Kevin Hart, now that he's actually apologized, because he did in so many words apologize. Like, he came right out in a tweet and said that he was sorry. And I don't think he owes anybody an apology anymore. But up until that point, he had not apologized. And now that he's apologized, I do feel like it's up to us to go ahead and be forgiving. You can't hold people responsible forever for having grown from one spot to the other. Otherwise, what's the point of evolving? What's the point of changing your thinking or learning to think in a different way or being open to different people if you're always going to be held to the thinking that you had when you were younger? I've been very honest about the fact that I grew up in Arizona in a time when racism was very well accepted, or discrimination was very well accepted. And so I personally said a lot of things not even knowing exactly what they meant, but that would be what would be considered racist by today's standards. By those standards, it was no big deal. But by today's standards, it definitely would be something that would need to be addressed. And I don't stand behind any of those words. Like I said, this is when I was much younger, and I didn't even realize exactly like the historical significance of certain words or the historical significance of certain terms. And I feel the same with Kevin Hart and his tweets when it was 2009, from when these tweets were put out. Like, even though I did think he was right to apologize for them, at the same time it was like it was 2009 and things were different. Like, I'm also very open about the fact when I first started doing comedy, a lot of people were very homophobic, and I could name names now and have them be actual comics that you know of, where you'd be like, yeah, that actually would be problematic thinking, or not the way that you would talk to people in this day and age. But why would I do that? Those people have grown, those people have changed, and those people come at me and what it is I am with a different perspective now, so I'm not going to hold them to that. Anyway, I would be interested to know what you guys think. We'll go ahead and talk about maybe the Chelsea Handler, all of their tweets and stuff like that, or maybe I could talk about that now. I had shared that just because I feel like when it comes to, if you don't know, like right after the Kevin Hart thing happened, Nick Cannon ended up posting like some tweets where he called out Amy Schumer, and he shared one of her tweets where she says a homophobic slur. He called out Sarah Silverman. He called out did I already say Chelsea Handler? Chelsea Handler as well, if I didn't say her. And I think there was one more. And he called them out and was like, hey, if we're going to hold Kevin Hart accountable, then we also need to hold these people accountable too. But I don't think that the United States is ready to work on that level. And I try to be more open minded and not seem like I'm being maybe racist or whatever. But when it comes down to it, when we're talking about white women, they just don't suffer the same consequence that a black man does. White women are considered less threatening, and so people are more likely to give them a pass and say, oh, well, she was just joking. She's a friend to the community. I think it's even worse at this point when you're a friend to the community. Because if you look at, because they were saying like, Kevin Hart's weren't jokes, and I agree with that. Kevin Hart's tweets that they were calling out weren't necessarily jokes, and if they were jokes, it was like where gay was the punchline, or the joke, like just gay was a joke. And so, but it was the same with Amy Schumer and Chelsea Handler and Sarah Silverman. It was just like the word fag was like their punchline, and it's like, yeah, those aren't really jokes either. And I do think that at some point they should apologize for it, not like skirt it, because that's what they've done so far too, is skirt it too, and just pull the kind of like it was a different time type of thing. But at some point, it's like, if you really do consider yourself to be an ally to the LGBT community, and people in the community feel like this is not acceptable for you to say, even though you think that because you've maybe helped us out in some way that now you're entitled to say those things, then I think that, the community has spoken, and that's something that you need to really acknowledge. And I had a guy try to come for me on Twitter yesterday, which I'll tell you guys, one thing I'm not doing with people is when people try to say, this is the way I feel about it, and this is a closed case, period, end of story, full stop. When people do that shit, I feel like, yeah, who are you to end a conversation? And especially because, like, especially if I don't know you and you're just somebody on the internet, it's like you've just decided that I'm not allowed to have this conversation altogether. Not that, not that you're out of the conversation, which I completely respect. If anybody's just like, I don't care about this, I'm not going to talk about it, fine. Don't talk about it. I don't care about it. That's your business. But at the same time, don't try to make it seem like the conversation is over just because you don't consider it to be an issue. Then I had another friend who his sister put out an article, and Tony Tripoli, LGBT comedian, LGBT comedian Tony Tripoli had responded to it because my friend, I would assume his sister is straight, wrote this article about how, and it got printed like as an opinion piece, like or published New York Times or something like that, or maybe it was Washington Post, something like that, something respectable. And it was just an opinion piece on why we need to just forgive Kevin Hart. And Tony Tripoli responded with, well, if you're not part of the affected community, I don't really think you can tell us that we're not supposed to be concerned with that. And that's something that I definitely do feel. Like, when you're not part of the community, you can't tell people that you're willing to forgive the other person on their behalf. That would be like, for me, if, somebody did something to offend the black community, and I was like, well, I think you need to just let it go. It's like, who are you to say? You don't even know what we're going through over here. You don't understand the full gravity of it. Because with the Kevin Hart situation, just to be clear on what it was that bothered a lot of us, as far as LGBT go, is that, one, we were definitely the punchline. It wasn't like there was an actual joke there and it just happened to be about a gay friend, or even the community in general. It was like the word fag was the punchline. And the other was when he said that if he came home and saw his son playing with his daughter's dollhouse, he would break the dollhouse over his son's head, which at first I hadn't really paid attention to until another friend of mine, comedian Jonas Barnes, brought to my attention in his post about that for certain gay people, LGBT people, having the gay beat out of them was a very real thing that happened to them. that's just something, unfortunately, that has happened to a lot of young LGBT or LGBT in their youth. And for me, my parents weren't to that extreme about it. They weren't happy about it, but I never had them try to beat the gay out of me. But when you have the kind of voice or the kind of reach and the kind of platform that Kevin Hart has, it's something that you have to think about, because some people really are taking you seriously and thinking like, oh, this is the way that I should conduct myself, or maybe this is an okay way for me to discipline my child if I feel like they're being gay. So it's just, for me, when it comes down to it, I'm glad it happened and I'm glad it got exposed, just because, one, well, just because it's really not going to hurt Kevin Hart. He makes plenty of money and he's going to continue to make plenty of money. And I don't think this is career ending at all. Actually, I don't think this is even going to be like a major hiccup for him. It's just a quick little, it happened, it's done. It may have felt like a big deal at the moment, but now it's not. But I think that it's great that the conversation is actually happening. And even if people need to say a few ignorant things to get to the next spot, I feel like we're on a good track here. So that's where I'm at with it. Let me know what you guys think. If you get a chance, please like this video, comment, and subscribe. This has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.